Yo yo yo, my name is Joel Zanha and welcome back to the channel. So a little more than a month ago, I decided to buy a soprano saxophone. And I chose soprano since I prefer smaller instruments for portability. And also I've never really known anybody who's played soprano in real life. So I decided to be the first one in my community to try it. However, I did do my full research and I do know that this is one of the hardest saxophones to play, and I was well aware of the difficulty of this instrument before I got it. And as someone who's never really touched a saxophone before, I knew that this would be a big challenge for me. And to be honest, after a few weeks, I don't think it's as hard as people make it seem. So this is the Venus SS305N. I don't know if you can see that, whatever. Which, as you can see, is a very popular and very well-known model. I actually have no idea how good this is. And since it was cheap and all the sites say not to buy the cheap sopranos, but oh well. And it's also curved instead of straight because I prefer curved for these reasons. I've had this for about a month, but I've only been playing it for about 3 weeks because I did need to get an overhaul done because the low notes would literally not play at all. They would physically not play at all. What happens when you buy instruments secondhand? And as of now, I can play the chromatic scale, so all the notes, including the flats and sharps, through the first and second octave. However, I do have a few problems, and I don't know how much of it to blame on the instrument and how much to blame on my incompetence. I don't know. So the first problem is the low notes are difficult to get out. And as I said before the overhaul, they were pretty much impossible to get out, but now they're just still difficult. If I just play the first octave going down, so you heard the D and the C, they were breaking up, and that's the problem that I have. I don't know if it's the instrument. I need to really move my mouth and put more of the mouth into the instrument in order to get those low notes to come out. But when they do come out, it's also super loud and honky. So I don't know how to fix that. Maybe some more practice. Second problem is obviously intonation. And as everyone says, the notes on the soprano are a lot more difficult to control than the alto or tenor, which, remember, I've never actually tried any of those, so I have nothing to compare to. But I can kind of understand how on the high notes especially, any slight change in the pressure that I put on the reed with my bottom lip will drastically change the pitch of the note. For example, I play a high G. Practice helps with this, but any little movement, especially on the higher octave of the lip, will really change the pitch of the note. Practicing long tones can help with that, but what I noticed that even if my long tones are good, if I start playing a song and I don't look at the tuner, I might just systematically play all the notes out of tune. For example, I might play this, and then the next time I'll play that's kind of exaggerated, but something like that happens, and it's not very consistent. It's not really good, especially when playing with other people. And I don't know, practice helps with that, I guess. And also, of course, the really high notes in the second octave are super hard to play in tune. So I'll get the tuner up here, and you'll see that I'll play the whole second octave, go away add, and then you'll see that it's hard to stay in tune. So, it is hard. But I haven't been practicing that much really, in terms of long tones and tone quality, so that's kind of expected. Last problem I get is fatigue. And yes, I can really only play this for about 30 seconds or so at most before I need to take a break and let my mouth muscles relax a bit. Because if I don't take a break, the mouth muscles will just start to do this because they're getting tired, and then it'll cause air leaks, and then the sound will just become really crappy. But this also might be exacerbated because I am using fairly difficult reed and mouthpiece. This reed is a 2.5, which is pretty hard for a beginner, or no, pretty soft for a beginner. And then the mouthpiece, I have no idea. It's a large tip opening. I can't tell because the print has all been worn off on the mouthpiece, but it's fairly difficult mouthpiece, I've been told. So I mean, if I really have trouble, I can always just get a better reed or easier mouthpiece, and it should help, which is a good thing. Like, you can't do that with flute, unfortunately. So those are the three main problems that I have with soprano saxophone so far. And again, those are expected problems because I've only been playing for 3 weeks. It's not too bad. So in terms of learning things like technique and fingering, it was very easy for me since I've already been playing flute for 7 months. And the fingering is actually very similar to flute, which is like... But I have no teacher. I only look at online tutorials, and I also have this book that has like some music I can play. I don't know if it's copyright. Look at this, like, they have this really bad fingering chart. Oh no, copyright. But it's arguably the worst fingering chart I've ever seen. That is super not user-friendly. But luckily, some sites, like this guy called Better Sax, he has like a really good fingering chart and that is user-friendly, and there's so many online resources that can help with saxophone playing, and I've used those. So on the topic of the flute, if I was to compare the difficulty of this to the flute, I would say that getting the first sound is harder on the flute because of the weird embouchure, but the sax, especially the soprano, is harder to get a stable sound in tune. Flute is easy to stay in tune once you've got the embouchure ready in the first place, because you don't have to like hold the mouth muscles. Flute doesn't fatigue your mouth at all, but sax does a lot. When you start playing a lot, it's really hard to control. Anyway, I should probably do a more in-depth saxophone versus flute comparison later on. So the point I want to make in this video is, honestly, if you don't play an instrument, I don't see what's wrong with starting out on soprano sax. I know everyone online is like, no, you must do alto before starting soprano. And like, I think like, why? Because for example, if you play alto saxophone for like 2 years and then switch to soprano, isn't that slower than just straight up starting on soprano and then just getting good in the first place? Because ultimately, if you want to get good at soprano, why start on alto when you can just go straight to soprano? So soprano saxophone is no doubt hard, but with the right resources, a teacher maybe, practicing long tones, making sure your instrument is in good shape, using a tuner, using a metronome, getting an easier reed or mouthpiece if it's too hard for you, if you fatigue too easily, I think anyone can just pick this up. You could definitely get good without needing prior experience on other instruments. And again, take this with a grain of salt because I've only been playing for 3 weeks, so I'm not an expert, but that's just what I think. So anyway, thanks for watching as always. Comment your thoughts down below. I want to see what you guys think about what I think. If you have any suggestions for me as well, because I'm just starting out, I'll be sure to reply to any comments you put down. And also leave a like if you enjoyed, and subscribe if you want to see more content like this in the future.